to build a business, of course you need a good idea, but you need to be able to sell that idea. You need to sell that idea to investors.
Yep.
You need to sell that idea to future employees. And you need to sell that idea to customers. And it all sort of works together. Someone who's very, very good at doing that has a very good chance of attracting the right people to build the right product that the customers are going to love, to sell to the customers, to keep the customers, and then also to attract and keep investors.
We are here with Thomas James. Can I call you Tom?
Yeah, sure.
And I'm your host, Noor. And today we're going to be talking about investing, Tom's experience with investing, all the ups and downs, life lessons, and also just getting to know a seasoned investor as a person. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm 56 years old. I've got 4 children, two grandchildren. I had to think about that for a moment. Obviously, one's left home, so and that's why I have the 2 grandkids, but I've got 3 teens that are sort of...
Is he at university now?
So my 3 teens are not now, so they're 14, 15, 16. So altogether, they were all in nappies at one stage, so quite glad that's not the case.
Like yesterday for you, right? Like yesterday.
Yeah, it's funny, when you kind of look back, how quickly time goes. And of course, as we all know, the older you get, the faster it goes. So
yeah. I'm starting to feel that as well. I know I'm about 26, I'm about 20, but a year for me used to feel like a lifetime, and now it's just going rapidly. I feel like I started university just yesterday, but almost finished now. So let's talk about, so we are AI Forge, and we are an incubator for startups. We help startups grow and accelerate and get on their feet 100 times faster than they would by themselves. Back in the day, you had your own startup, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, I had, I guess, quite an unconventional route into startup, or maybe a conventional one if you look at it. I left school when I was 15, and I was doing lots of different things, and I was lucky enough to get in on a graduate intake program for a really pioneering technology company that were working with Texas Instruments, essentially to redefine the way software was being built for large enterprise.
When was this?
Well, you probably better work out the years for me, because I'm 56 now, so it would have been 80, in the 80s somewhere.
80s, okay.
Yeah, so, and as part of, we were a very young company selling something quite innovative, and so the company attracted really, really amazing people. And somehow I'd managed to squeak into this graduate intake program. And from that, I got the opportunity to go out and work in Sweden and help one person set up our business in Sweden. And so I did that for a couple of years with some. It was great fun, actually, culturally for me. I was a country boy. I'd never lived in a city, and my first city was to go and live in Stockholm, which was just like, it's fantastic. And it was just amazing, even down the food, the people. And I guess that's sort of one of the things I really remember about it. I grew up in sort of a town, Northamptonshire, and the town itself was quite a rough town.
Okay.
And then I went to Stockholm, and people were just not that way. And people were very friendly. Well, if you were out in a bar and you were chit-chatting or you bumped into someone, no one was going to sort of just, try and, start a fight with you. It was, they'd rather talk to you and find out who you were. And
I've noticed that in London as well, living in London my whole life. And then, when I venture around to other English towns, people are just a lot less predisposed to being confrontational. They're just a lot more, by default, friendly and, warm. Maybe it's just a capital city thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that was really nice arriving in Stockholm, and because I was a foreigner back in the day, my age didn't really matter. So everyone I went to see, and because of what we were selling, we were into the largest companies, in the top 50 companies basically in Sweden. Everyone just let you in because they assumed you were a bit of an expert because you'd been sent to Sweden, and so age didn't matter. So I found myself in these amazing conversations with people, talking to them about rebuilding their entire sort of enterprise portfolio at a really, really young age, and I had to pinch myself all the time. And but I worked with some really good people, and we sold some amazing projects. And then after 2 years there, I went to do that in Denmark, which I did for about another 4 years. But I set up the business in Denmark for them on my own. And then I also, during that time, I'd been commuting to Finland and acquired a bunch of Finnish customers and helped set up our Finnish business. And I had a call from one of the guys I'd been on the graduate intake program with, and he was based out in South Africa, and said, look, why don't you fancy leaving and setting up a consultancy business to provide consultants into your customers, Tom, in Scandinavia? I was like, well, yeah, it sounds like a great idea, because our customers were lacking the skills to implement our technology. And we actually, as it so happened, had done very well in South Africa. So a lot of available resource in South Africa.
What the technology itself, like what's like the high level overview of what it kind of did?
Well, essentially the way you traditionally build computer systems is, someone will come and tell you what they want. And then you'll sit down with a sort of programmer, designer, and they'll sort of say, well, how do you want to interact with this system? And there'll be some code written, and there'll be this kind of long, clumsy process to actually end up building something that's supposed to support your needs. And traditionally that would take a long time. It was more like an arts project than an engineering project. And what we were selling was this idea that we'll capture these requirements in the form of models, and capture the business rules in a form of syntax, independent of the underlying technology. So if you wanted to put, some of these technologies might not be familiar, but back in the day we had mainframe systems with green screens. And then we just started also delivering, Windows type interfaces to some of these systems as well. And depending on the kinds of users in the organization, so if you're a teller in a bank, it'll be a green screen, it's much more efficient. But if you're a sort of, a more occasional user, a Windows interface in those times would be better, but you're still accessing the same piece of logic at the back end on an IBM mainframe. To build those systems required a lot of different skills. So you've got mainframe COBOL skills with DB2, which was the database, maybe CICS or IMS as a transaction processing monitor, Windows or OS2 as an interface, and with some logic maybe there as well, and perhaps an Oracle database or whatever it may be, and then all the communications and synchronization. So that would require an awful lot of different skills in an IT organization. We were coming in saying, look, if you build this logically, we'll take care of all the generation of all the code and communications to allow this to sit heterogeneously wherever you want it. So if you want somebody on a mainframe environment with a green screen CICS interface, fine, we'll do that automatically. You want to have some of that running on a Windows GUI interface, we'll do that automatically. So all you have to do is define logically what you want and how you want to interact. All of the code and everything else is taken care of.
So you provided like an extra layer where they could just provide their high-level overview, and then you would handle the integrating of the lower layers.
Well, our tools would do it automatically. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, if you want to, you could call it code generation, I'd call it system generation, because we did everything that was required.
And then you started a consultancy where you basically did this.
So the key to success, and the key to success ultimately was the idea of automating the back-end processes, which are quite procedural,
right,
is that you can then dedicate time in defining what the business wants and how you want the business to be supported in a logical way, and spend a lot of time there rather than traditionally where all your time was spent coding.
Right.
And so where the skills were in properly defining what the business wanted. And those were consultancy skills. And there were some technical skills at the bottom end that we needed to provide around our platform. But it was as much at sort of the high-end consultancy skills around helping the business understand what it really wanted, as opposed to thinking about how we're going to write code to support what the business wants.
It's kind of similar to the emergence now of prompt engineering, right? It's just about defining what you really want in the best way so that the back-end automation processes can sort it out properly.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny. I'm doing this course at Oxford at the moment on artificial intelligence, and it's really, and I look at it and I go, you know what? It's yes, of course, things are fundamentally different, but what we were doing back in the day would have been defined back in the day as artificial intelligence. I mean, until we get to artificial general intelligence, we're talking about taking essentially a lot of procedural things away and automating those, and that's what we were doing in the whole systems arena, building computer systems.
So it's all about, I mean, I think someone, I forgot who it was, they defined technology as doing more with less, giving humans the ability to do more with less effort, right? So it's all about automation. I guess that's what AI is. It's finding a problem and finding what's currently being allocated time and effort towards, and how can we allow technology to just give the normal person, the layman person, just the ability to solve this problem with much less effort without specialist expertise.
Yeah, so in that sense, what we were doing, we were putting in the hands of people who wouldn't. I mean, I trained I had no technology skills, and I went on a graduate intake program, and I was building IBM mainframe and systems and distributed computer systems, and I had no idea of the underlying technology. I didn't have a clue. So, there you go. That's an example of someone who, in the workforce wouldn't have been able to contribute in that way. I can contribute in a much more productive way.
Yeah.
And, absolutely. So, when everyone talks about AI today, in a sense, it's a power tool for, you could argue, to bring, pretty low skilled workers up to the level of, pretty skilled workers, which is pretty exciting, actually.
Would you consider the consultancy perhaps your first startup?
Completely. So we set up this consultancy, and we did very well. And essentially what we were doing is we were lifting and shifting resources, people out of South Africa up into Scandinavia. Now, it was in some sense it was quite a tall order, because South Africa's a pretty nice place to live in spite of all the problems they'd had, and a lot of the people who came from Cape Town. And you sort of look at it and go, why would people leave that amazing environment and come to Scandinavia, which is pretty dark a lot of the year, certainly the further north in Scandinavia or the Nordic region you go. But actually they all wanted foreign currency earnings. So there was an ability for them. They could leave South Africa, come and earn, because there were exchange controls in place in South Africa at the time.
Was there some level of inflation going on?
Well, we had exchange controls in place. So, you could earn foreign currency, and that foreign currency, when you came home, worth a lot more, and you converted it, would be worth a lot more to you than if you'd stayed at home and earned, local currency. So for them, for a lot of the people who came, they were young people, very highly skilled, and just really wanted to, make a difference in their own lives financially, which it did. We were actually able to sell those resources in very competitively into my customers versus the local resource. And actually, because they were so experienced, it was easy for us to maintain pretty high rates for those resources.
And that's your sales ability. And what about on the investment side? Did the kind of economic environment make finding investors an easier process? Or?
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about our chat today and just the whole thing about investing, and it was quite weird because we didn't have any investors. What we invested was the risk capital was the fact we didn't take salary in the beginning. Oh. So, we would go and sign the contracts, get the people, deploy them, and over time, the business would get to a point where we could start to pay ourselves. But when there were three of us who actually left and to do this, and when we left to set this up, we had no other income streams. So there were no third-party investors.
You went all in.
So we went all in, and in some ways that's been a bit, if I look at the investment climate today and how we invest, it can be really frustrating sometimes talking to founders, because I don't think they really understand what all-in's about. Back in the day doing what we were doing, it was probably almost impossible to get investment.
So what would you consider all in?
Well, we're committed. We have to succeed.
Have to succeed.
Yeah, we have no choice. And in fact, that probably came to the fore a few years later, because we grew our business really well. And I had been, in the intervening time, I had 1 year where I'd worked in the UK, and I'd helped set up for the same company I'd been working for, I'd helped sell a solution built on our technology platform into the telecommunications sector. So the UK was the first market to deregulate in the world. And what that meant was the BT, British Telecom, which owned all of the infrastructure for telecommunications in the UK, had to offer up its network to third parties who were given licenses to come and operate in the UK and essentially compete with it. Now, when those operators came in and used BT's network, there was an agreed charging mechanism for the use of their network. And so BT had built a system called Inca, which would charge those operators who use the network. So the single biggest bill a new operator who came to the UK would get every month or every quarter, wherever it was the bill from Inca. So the one thing that they had to verify was correct was this bill from British Telecom. Now, we had helped build BT's Inca system, and then we built the system on the other side to verify everything from BT's Inca system, which we ended up selling to operators. And I'd signed, during my year in the UK, I'd signed Colt and MFS, who were the sort of two, and this process of, these were interconnect carriers, specialists in this whole area. And so I signed these two up, and I went back to Scandinavia to set up ultimately this consultancy business with my two colleagues. And one day I had a call while I was out walking my child in the pram in the park, and saying, that part of the business I'd worked in for that short period of time was up for sale. Were we interested in buying it? Really? Well, maybe. It's actually, the market's deregulating around the world. It's following the UK model. There's actually a really good opportunity here. So we all chatted together, and one of my partners, his wife used to run the underground newspaper for the ANC. So, and at that time, we had this movement in South Africa where you had these, what they call black empowerment organizations. So these organizations were set up to try and, if you were, transform the environment, the situation in South Africa where there was much more sense of, indigenous ownership, if you will, of contracts and opportunities. So a lot of money was poured into these organizations, and one of them was called New Africa Investments Limited. And so New Africa Investments Limited were quite keen on, like a lot of them were, diversifying their interests. So part of it was investing in South African companies, right, South African contracts, but they also wanted to invest in some overseas opportunities. And Cyril Ramaphosa was chairman of New Africa Investments Limited, and he was then chair of the National Union of Mine Workers, and obviously a key part of the ANC. And so one of my partner's wives knew Cyril Ramaphosa quite well. So there was a dialogue with Nail and with Cyril, and said, and they said, look, we'd be quite interested in investing in you because you're a very profitable organization, you're doing very well, and helping you acquire these assets for this telecommunications business. So
so he was maybe your first investor?
Yeah, so Nail were our first investor, New Africa Investments were our first investor. Wow. And we paid them back, and they earned quite a lot of money from us. But at that time, as part of that whole thing, we also had to put some more of our own money in. So any residual money we had sort of went back into our business, and we acquired these assets eventually from my former employer for this telecommunications software platform. Well, it wasn't really a platform in the way that we know it. It was an individual kind of every single customer at the time, it being quite bespoke. So we had runway for perhaps 6 months, which really wasn't long enough at the time because we paid about $7 million for it. And when we lifted the lid on what had to be done, it was a lot more than we realized. And it was at one point we were probably 2-3 weeks away from running out of money, and we had no other source of money. And I remember thinking about that, going, my goodness, okay, that's it. It's everything. And I was thinking that a bit before, but we were working night and day to secure, not only to stabilize our platform, so it was a common platform, and convince existing customers to migrate to this common platform we built, but to acquire a new customer with some new revenue. Mm-hmm. And
so you were trying to work off the sales at that point rather than find new investors?
Yeah, well, absolutely, because there really wasn't a very active investment market. We were, in some ways, we were quite lucky, and it was because of that unique situation, A, with the relationship we had in South Africa, but B, because they were looking for foreign exchange. In a sense, we were a South African company.
Right.
So it was a kind of a unique situation. So very fortunately, we managed to win a customer in Spain, a company called Retavision, and we signed that deal 2 weeks before we would have run out of money.
On the deadline.
Yeah, and it's funny, because you invest in a lot of companies, and in some ways it doesn't always have to. You don't always have to incur a lot of pain on the way to success, but quite often you do, and then having gone through all of that pain and somehow pulled it back from the cliff edge, things just completely change, and it did. And so 2 years later, we listed the business on the London stock market. So
2 years later,
yeah. So that was a complete turnaround.
Yeah. So that's a complete reversal. In 2 years.
So, but that can happen. We just needed it.
Right.
We needed a. They can say, and I'll often say that when you sort of invest in companies, you need a bit of luck. They need a bit of luck, but
did you know your financial situation when they invested?
No.
Did they know they were digging you out?
No, because we had some great looking customers.
Okay.
So we had, France Telecom Italia. We had some great customers, Colt and WorldCom. These were really, so in a sense, we had the things we needed to sell.
But they didn't. Okay, so they just looked at, who you were currently providing for and the success. They weren't looking at, in depth your metrics, how you're actually doing as a company, but the actual outcomes that you already gave.
So I mean, it's an interesting, nowadays when we think about SaaS and we think about rapid implementation, low friction, but back in the day, to implement a system like this, I mean, our competitor was talking 1.5 years to implement their system. When we rebuilt our platform, we said, whatever happens, we have to be able to implement for our customers in 45 days. That's what we're going to do. That was our goal. And if we can do that, we think we'll take this market.
And that was before you even knew how you're going to do it. You had a top-down approach.
Completely.
45 days. Okay, yes. Now let's figure out how you're going to do that.
Completely. And so it just meant completely rethinking every aspect of what we were doing.
Right.
Which was really exciting. And it was because we were thinking about it from a customer perspective. And also, we had a competitor that was doing a lot better than us. And we had to change the game. And we fundamentally felt as well, we could do this so much better.
This is quite a fundamental thing as well. It's putting what can you sell first, and then, okay, after you've sold it, after you've sold whatever idea you've had, then you think about the product, actual product itself, how it's going to work and all the nitty gritty. But it's all about the sales first, right?
So, you've got to, but even when we sold the Interconnect platform in the first place, the Interconnect 2.0, which I'd sold when I was at JMA at the time, I remember the head of MFS billing turned around to me and said, well, you don't have this, Tom, do you? But I'm trusting you're going to build it. And we're like, don't worry, we will.
Just trust me.
Just trust me, we will. And, I think there's that old adage of, don't build it till you've sold it. Mm-hmm. But just make sure you love your customer to death after you've done that. And, I think if we invested a lot of time to make sure we delivered on what we promised. But there is another important aspect of that, is that because the ratio typically of implementation revenues to software revenues were probably 4, 5 or more to 1, it massively impacted the valuation of the business that you had. So we wanted to turn that on its head. We wanted software revenues to be 4, 5 to 1 the size of the services revenues.
It's more like today, right?
Yeah, it's more like today, because we felt we'd get a much better valuation for our business, which is what happened. And it created an interesting problem, because to get into the larger operators, we had to work with Hewlett-Packard, Accenture, IBM. And we had big fights with them over, they wanted to put in large services revenues, numbers relative to license fees with the customer. We're like, well, no, we are not doing this. We're not supporting it if you do that. I mean, I have numerous situations where their services number, which was literally just wrapping our number because we were doing the work, would have been 5 times what we were putting in. And we're like, well, we're not doing that. That's not how we go to market with this.
What was it that made you oppose that?
Because we wanted the customer to talk to other customers about what good value it was in terms of what we were doing. And we felt sometimes, and it's quite true, that we didn't want our product to be, in a sense, that sort of the Trojan horse for lots of services. We wanted to go in, deliver value, and get out. And the customer go, that was brilliant, because if everyone can talk about a lot of these enterprise platforms in SAP, obvious one. You buy SAP, well, you can buy a lifetime of consulting. It doesn't just go in and they walk away and you're done. And we just didn't want that reputation. And we felt really passionate about that.
Okay. And would you say that's an approach that would work today?
So, one of the things when when I talking to people I'm looking to invest in is, it's all about friction. What are you doing about friction? What are you doing about...
Friction in what sense?
Friction in terms of onboarding, and friction in terms of ongoing need for the use of your services. And the market anyway drives this, because if you look at, the revenues associated with software companies versus software and services companies, if you look at the multiples are so much better for software companies. So you absolutely do not want to be doing something that's service heavy. So.
Okay, so you would say you want something that's a smooth funnel for customers to come in, and you think that's driven by the market, or is it something you can, implement? It's something you can do to reduce the friction.
So, one is obviously multiples and valuations drive behaviors.
Yeah.
That's true. But the reality is it's much, having run and had services businesses, I'd much rather have a software company and embed the expertise in the platform than have it embedded in people's heads, because it's just much easier to scale. And, and that's the other aspect to this, is if I'm not having to use a lot of resource to implement my platform and maintain it on the customer side, I can sell many more of them with the same resource.
That's the benefit of software, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And even compared to software as a SaaS, you're not having to spend much time as well. I would say the best comparison would be with biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies where, the biggest capital investment is at the start, right? Just trying to find the products and refine it and test everything. But then with software as a service, scalability is best benefit. You don't have to spend millions on research and stuff before, right? It's the best scalable option.
Well, you need to have a product that you can scale.
Yeah.
And so you need to spend a lot of time and money building out a product that people want. And, I think one of the challenges is quite often just because you've built something that works for one customer doesn't mean that everyone else is going to want it. And I think that can be, again, when you're looking at companies you invest in, is where's most of the revenue coming from? Is it one customer or is it a spread of customers? Because you need to genericize what you're doing. I mean, I know when we build our telecoms platform, I talk to France Telecom, they want one thing. I talk to Telecom Italia, they want another. They want another. And you have to have that really hard conversation, which is, actually, do you know what? This is what we're delivering. And whatever you want to do around that, that's up to you. But this is what we do. And we do this because we want to scale what we do so we can afford to deliver stuff to you very efficiently and maintain it. If we start bespoking for you, it's ultimately going to cost you more money. It's going to mean also for us, it means it's less easy for us to scale what we're doing with lots of other people.
What would you say have you never experienced it where you've really dug in and spoken to clients and found there's a particular niche pain point that is really diverse? It's really generalized. Everyone experiences pain point in this small sector. Or is it almost everyone has maybe a similar problem, but it's a bit diversified in a certain way?
Well, if you want to build a scalable software business, you've got to find a problem that's scalable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple.
What about adaptable?
Well, I think the way traditionally platforms have been architected, you could argue today in this world of AI that, you can perhaps start building things that in one sense are, that are kind of more genericized, that allow in the hands of multiple people to deliver. I mean, look at ChatGPT. I mean, it delivers huge amounts of value to huge amounts of people for very different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, if we're building a SaaS solution, if we're building the next Salesforce, we're building the, next SAP, there's a specific set of things we're trying to solve. And that's what we're doing. And of course, what they do to augment that is build a marketplace around it and an ecosystem that adds value to what they do at their core.
Let's talk about your experience with investing. So I imagine your experience in startup and business has given you a much better perspective when you invest in startups, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we raised this money off New Africa Investments Limited, we also invested in a lot of other startups ourselves. So, and we learned some pretty hard lessons there, actually, from in the beginning, us with our own money. And, as I said earlier on, when we had to put our own money and time in, no one else was putting money and time in the beginning.
Yeah.
And when we had some money to spend, we started putting money into companies. And maybe we didn't really look deep enough about a lot of what we were doing. And we felt just, putting money in companies and we like what they're doing. We think the people are nice and it's going to be great. But actually people didn't treat, quite a lot of the people we invested in didn't treat the money in terms of the real value it could have brought them. And because it wasn't their money. And I think if I look now, one of the things that's really important is that whoever you invest with, you've got to feel that, they're looking after your money for you. They're making your money work. And that manifests in a lot of behaviors. So, we were chatting the other day with somebody and it's quite interesting. So you're you go through this process of looking to invest in a company, and so you'll have a dialogue with the founder. Send them a message on the weekend. Are they going to respond to the weekend? They're going to wait till Monday morning. If they're not going to respond to the weekend, they're not going to be looking after your money 7 days a week. The weekend test, how much are they looking to pay themselves? Because quite often you'll go in and you'll look, and you've got founders of startups looking to pay themselves 80, 100,000 pounds. It's like, well, hold on a minute, that's corporate. That's not startup. And
what would you recommend? What's the max?
The absolute minimum. And in a way, look, there are a number of things that one of the startups I invested in here in the UK is a company called Cognizant.
Okay.
And the founder of Cognizant paid himself very little. It was, as well as being an amazing person in himself, and it was, someone, when you meet that kind of person, you go, actually, I've just got to find a way to invest. But also his attitude to money, he understood, look, okay, I need something to live out of here in the beginning, but I recognize we need this money that you're putting in as investors to deploy on acquiring customers, on building product, and on supporting customers. And, and I think sometimes even for me, I'll make that mistake of not really zeroing in on that, because it's these little indicators, it's those indicators that sort of betray, if you will, a sort of more general kind of attitude as to how they're going to be, in their business as a whole.
I would add to that. Do you ever look at maybe if they've gotten their friends or family to invest, because have they been willing to expose their people they care about to that risk? Is that something you look at as well?
Yeah, I think how do I think about that? I think the other people on the cap table who are looking to invest can be useful. I wouldn't necessarily think about friends and family in that way.
Particularly in the pre-seed stage. Do you have much experience investing in startups in that really early stage, pre-seed, before their first funding round at all? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like getting involved right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And of course, who knows at that point what's going to happen? And I think it's very DD light in a sense, from a due diligence perspective. There's obviously not a lot to do. And personally, my preference is companies at that stage or pre-seed, seed. I really, really like that.
There's a lot of, it's high risk, right? It's high risk, high reward. There's a new system, or relatively modern system, SEIS, which kind of mitigates that risk. Do you ever take advantage of that, or?
Yeah, sure. One of the great advantages investing in the UK is that, there are brilliant tax breaks for investing in startup companies. And so it's really nice to be able to benefit from that. And, for founders, it's fantastic as well, because obviously it's much easier to attract investment. But I think there's the opportunity cost of the capital as well. So for me, I'd much rather, if I take the kind of example, I could look at an opportunity, go, I kind of like that opportunity. Can I see it in a really good day going to 100 times? Don't think so. And they're SEIS. And then I look at another opportunity that's not SEIS, and it could be overseas. Mm-hmm. And do I see that going to 100 times? Yeah, it could do. So where am I going to put my 25K? I'm going to go for the 100X, because for me, that's what I want to do, on the basis that if only 2 or 3 of those come off, or one of those comes off in 10, I've done really well. Whereas if I'm kind of investing in 10X opportunities, it's, from a thesis perspective, it doesn't really work for me. So whilst in the UK, it's great, the merit of the startup, has to justify the investment. The tax benefit's just a kind of nice thing to have on the side. So that's how I look at it anyway.
I'd say it's, would you ever consider, perhaps, let's say you've looked in the investment in its bones, you're not thinking, oh, well, I get this tax break and then that makes it a good investment. It's either a good investment or it's not, right? And would you ever say sometimes something is a good investment, it's just the risk, the opportunity cost, as you say, is just a bit, it's a bit off-putting, but then in light of the fact that I can get, such a large percent of my investment completely saved by this SEIS scheme and this tax relief as well, and also benefits of capital gains tax. Would you say that kind of pushes it over the edge sometimes when you've considered something a good investment, but the risk without any sort of relief is pretty high? But then once you've got this relief, it just brings it to a level where you can consider, yes, this is the opportunity cost for this investment is objectively good.
So I think if, it depends how widely I'm investing. I think clearly sometimes it can be quite emotional investing, in a sense you try and step back and do things for all the sort of right logical reasons. But, you get drawn in because you have a, particular connection with the founder. And I think maybe sometimes you don't necessarily feel as good about the investment opportunity, but you kind of would like to work with that person because, well, you like them and you like the space they're in. And yeah, in that context, I think the SEIS side of things probably could swing it, absolutely.
And okay, so would you recommend investing more in the founder or in the idea?
Yeah, well, I think it's a common mistake, and I've made it many times myself, is to invest in the idea. It's absolutely the founder. It's, the reality is, in order to build a business, of course you need a good idea, but you need to be able to sell that idea. You need to sell that idea to investors.
Yeah.
You need to sell that idea to future employees. And you need to sell that idea to customers. And it all sort of works together. Someone who's very, very good at doing that has a very good chance of attracting the right people to build the right product that the customers are going to love, to sell to the customers, to keep the customers, and then also to attract and keep investors. So it does come back down to the individual. And again, as I said, I've made this mistake many times of forgetting that because I fall in love with the idea. And it's all too easy to do because there are so many brilliant ideas out there. But you do have to step back and go, look, do I believe this person is going to do it? And it may be that it doesn't happen in that incarnation in terms of that opportunity with that person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to happen at some point with that person. So there is the longer play on this as well, that that opportunity might not, work out for whatever reason. Some sort of existential thing happened and the business didn't work. But you've got the relationship with that person will go on and do something. I think if all of us step back and we look at all the people we've met in our lives, there was something about the people that you can then see who've gone on and done things. And they always had that thing. And so it's the same when you're investing. You meet those people and you kind of go, yeah, and I know they're going to do something. If it's not now, it's later.
So let's say with Apple, for example, if you're looking at their really early Mac products, some people think, oh, I should have known from then, this is edging on a very innovation with unlimited potential. Would they perhaps have to pivot that mindset from the proof is in the pudding, so it's going to succeed, to perhaps a mindset of, oh, look at Steve Jobs. This man is obviously going to succeed.
Look, I mean, Steve Jobs is known for telling stories. And he told a great story. People didn't buy a product, they bought a story with Apple. And it's the same the world over. You buy the story from the person, and then it's up to that person to deliver on that promise.
The story is 45 days and will deliver your system.
Whatever it may be, yeah.
And okay, so with founders who are in the very early pre-seed stage, which your experience in dealing with, what would you say is different from investing in these founders who haven't got their concrete ideas and products in this very early stage compared to the founders who are perhaps a bit later stage? What do you look for in them?
Well, in the early stage ones?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just as I've said to you, do you connect with them? Do they excite you? Do you think they're going to go and do something special? Because in that way, it's much easier in some ways than investing later on, because and the danger is I think sometimes to look too deeply.
Too deeply?
Yeah, in the early days, because I think it is about the person. And then as things start to grow, I think you're looking, well, is this thing scalable? This idea really scalable?
Okay, to what extent do you, dive in and survey them? How deep do you go?
Now it's going to sound strange, but I think so. I get a
text to their girlfriends.
Yeah, no, I just get a feel for them.
Yeah.
Have a few meetings, discuss. I'll introduce them to some other people I know. So I'll try and triangulate a bit on what other people I know and respect think. I'll do a bit of DD on the idea. So quite often I'll be investing in things I don't know anything about, but I know people who do know things about. Know things about that area. So I'll kind of ask them, what do you think? Have a conversation. What do you think about the idea? And in the process, what do you think about the person? So, then it's a question of, so once you've sort of gone, yeah, the idea seems to make sense. People in the industry I know in that space have gone, yeah, they're doing something special. They're onto something. And then, in the founder, it's like, well, yeah, just what are the people that I've introduced them to think?
What's the consensus?
And I think even when it's really early, I'd really like to see that they've sold to somebody. They've got some people on the hook in some way, shape or form.
Do you have any particular maybe success or failure stories about it? About maybe a founder you've invested in that really early stage? Because you've been investing for 30 years?
Yeah.
30 years. And also, I'm interested, how do you think it's changed at all from when you started?
Yeah, well, I think the idea of investing in startups is a thing now. And
it wasn't a thing before.
No, nothing like that. If you were going to be in a startup, in some sense it was self-qualifying, because if someone had left and started their own startup, they probably were pretty ballsy. They were backing themselves. Nowadays, it's kind of like, well, shall I go into Fortune 500 company, or should I start a startup? I'm not sure. Those two things are not compatible. And one of the challenges now, I think, for people investing is realizing that people who have started startups are actually better placed in a large company, not in a startup, and flushing that out early. Because I think what ends up happening, and that's why people want too much money, they don't look after the money, they don't actually have any idea of what it's like. Because when you're in startup, you're doing everything.
HR, sales.
Yeah, you're making it up as you go along. You really are, and also you're conceiving what you're doing with customers. I mean, I think I said it earlier. You don't build it till you sold it, and so what that means is you've got to actually engage customers early in the process, and get them to fund what you're doing. I mean, it was always quite strange for me, this idea that, well, we're going to go and borrow a lot of money, we're going to build something, and then we're going to put it out in the market and see if people want to buy it. And it's like, well, but why are you getting money off other people to do that? Why don't you just get the customers to give it to you? Because if they've got the problem, they want it solving, surely they're going to pay you. Because that's kind of how we started out. And I'm like, kind of like, well, surely, but that's not the way it is. And one of the problems is with startups, I think quite often they'll be quite well capitalized at the beginning, but they just waste the money because the basics are still true. They haven't changed. Everything's got to be driven outside in from the customer. It's all about the customer engagement, and it's all about supporting those customers come what may. And in that process of continuing to support them, you refine the product and ultimately end up building the product that you promised at the outset, but they've given you time to build because you looked after them so well. Because there's always a bit of that goes on. Yeah.
So you'd recommend for a startup, even at the ideation stage, your idea should just be as blank as possible and put the customer first. What do you need? What do you want? And then develop from that starting point.
Yeah, I think you've got an idea.
Yeah.
Well, you can market test that idea, and you can build a product to test it. You just go and have conversations, and people say, and people are very willing to engage in that process with you, and discuss with them, talk to them, start defining stuff, start doing some mock-ups. Again, they don't cost anything to do the mock-ups, and build a very cheap MVP with a bubble or whatever it may be, and go out and talk to customers with that, and I think you should be able to acquire your first startups relatively easy. And if you can't, then you're probably missing one of the key attributes of being a good founder. So, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about there's so many startups in AI right now, artificial intelligence. There's so many, all providing different services, all providing obvious value in certain, in different sectors, from finance to healthcare. It's similar to, some would say .com, when, the internet was just becoming, the obvious commercial aspect of it was becoming obvious, and different startups popping up left, right, and center. How do you as an investor dig into a startup based around artificial intelligence and decipher, is this promising?
Well, I think what's been quite, because of course around the .com boom there's a lot of hype, there's that whole hype cycle, and then it just sort of crashes afterwards of course the hype cycle happens because there's media interest, and then because there's media interest, a lot of money flows into the sector, and then there's a sort of big washout, and inevitably this is going to happen around AI, and there's loads of money flying. If you look at where money is being deployed at the moment in terms of investment in tech startups, AI is where it's all going pretty much. And so,
but it's estimated, I think, by McKinsey that AI is going to add trillions to the global economic output within, I think, this decade.
So it depends where we are in the hype cycle. So, at some point, AI inevitably is going to add, unbelievable amounts of value. But whether it's going to add that value now, or whether actually there's going to be a sort of a calm before the sort of, the storm, if you will, after the sort of, all the hype and excitement, I don't know. But, technological innovation seems to follow, a very similar pattern. I mean, where we are within AI, and you can't I don't think we can generalize around AI anyway, because there are aspects of AI of along different parts of that hype cycle already. Some at the beginning, and some actually towards delivering real value today to the economy.
We can definitely discern that there are some startups which are going to inevitably become unicorns, or some may crash. It's kind of binary, isn't it? And do you have an opinion yet as to, what you would look for in, someone with an idea or a startup who's got that unicorn potential or doesn't?
Yeah, so I've invested in a lot of companies who are using AI anyway, and they've been deploying AI for years, but it was more of it wasn't considered as mainstream as it is now. So, I've got 2 UK startups I invested in. Cognizant's one, and, they've got a huge data science AI team. Tessian's another. But, I probably look at 30% of my portfolio has got some aspect of AI in it. I think the difference for me as an investor today is anyone who's not talking about AI, and in a sense of it's, we went through this sort of mobile first era, and if it's not AI first in what they're doing, then I'm probably talking to the wrong people, from an investment perspective. And we had, when we were selling what we were doing when I was in my early 20s, and we'd turn up to, large IT organizations and IT directors, and we had acetates back in the day, on a slide projector, and then put the acetate down, and you've got the captain of the archers who's, they're all, they're in a war, and it's the machine gun salesman tapping the captain on the shoulder saying, I need to talk to you. And the captain of the archers says, well, look, I haven't got time to talk to you. I've got a water fight. Now, believe it or not, that's still happening. That's happening today around AI. So I go see some startups who look, who are great, really promising and everything else. And I say, well, so what are you doing around AI? And so, we're busy doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. When we've raised our next investment round, we'll probably look at doing something in that. I say, well, do you not know whether AI is being deployed anywhere in your organization today? Do you know if you're using Copilot in your development organization? No. So, well, for me, that's a really big warning sign, because, and more so than ever before, because things are moving so fast. You might have an okay business or an okay opportunity in front of you, but that opportunity could just disappear with a competitor who's going to look at it, the problem set that you're dealing with, but with AI in his pocket. He's got the power tool. You're on the bicycle. He's in the racing car. It's just.
That's probably one of the biggest selling points of startups at the moment, is that with these big corporations, there's so much red tape and bureaucracy just to implement the smallest things, to really innovate and apply the innovative technology to, skyrocket your business in different divisions, versus a startup from the ground up. They have infinite flexibility. They can, pivot one way and pivot the other way, just like that, and completely changing their business processes without going through, 6 months of admin just to get the ball rolling. So yeah, I think that's from the ground up is where the innovation with AI is probably going to be happening.
The challenge you've got though, and I mean, one of the reasons we're here today, because of AI Forge. I haven't got my AI Forge t-shirt on, but it was interesting because I'd known Craig for years. I nearly invested in his first startup and I didn't, but I've always liked Craig. And when they launched AI Forge, so I wanted to come along and hear what they were doing. And what I think, if startups are going to have a chance, they need to be working with accelerators or incubators who are bringing that infrastructure around AI and that expertise, because I think it's very hard to raise the amount of money that you need to realistically come up with something of value, take the risk of acquiring the right people in a very competitive market, trying to build an infrastructure first time round rather than reusing one that's being used over and over and over again. So working with incubators like AI Forge or accelerators like AI Forge, I think it's crucial for startups. I mean, when I'm looking at startups now, if they're not doing anything around AI and I really like them, I'm saying, look, go and talk to an AI accelerator, incubator. You need to work with them. Don't talk to me about raising money or other investors about raising money to build your own team. Go and talk to someone who's got the capability in-house and can deliver that to you so you can deliver value straight away or, really quickly.
It's the perfect environment to put someone in that's not thinking about how they can accelerate their business and using AI as well. You're surrounded by experts, PhDs, you've got infinite access to developers, you've got people who have been there, done that, with so many successful exits. You're constantly surrounded by other founders who are thinking about and developing ways they can use AI in their business. Perhaps they could be your potential team members. Probably the environment that your founders are in, is that people you invest in, is that something you look at as well?
Completely. And one of the nice things for me, I mean, I kind of look at it with AI Forge, for example. I am driving quite a lot of people towards AI Forge early stage, and I do it very much for not only what the program delivers, but also the ecosystem within which they get to sort of operate. And even a lot of the people I've invested in, I talk to them and say, well, look, there's this incubator going on over there. They're doing some great stuff, and these can be people running large data science teams. And they go, look, well, we'd love to get involved. We'd love to help. So it's sort of I just feel as an investor, it's just when I think about the scariness of investing in AR in this marketplace, I think it's investing in and around companies that are sort of working in, well-connected incubators. I mean, for example, AI Forge, it de-risks the process massively, because it is risky. But there's the other side of that, which is, but it's exciting.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're looking at, these startups based around AI, and you've got the fact that the government with SCIS is telling you, so, if you invest in these startups, we're going to relieve you of basically, at least half of your risk and your tax. And then at the same time, that they've gone through an accelerator, that they've been surrounded by people, experts in their field, and their idea in themselves as a founder has been pushed to their limit. It probably gives you more peace of mind as an investor.
I think, even, as I say, because I've been investing I think I'm investing in about 250 companies, so I've kind of been through it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But if I think about, for me now, I just made a very conscious decision. I don't want to invest in anyone who's not in that kind of environment at a very early stage, because I know how important that is, and more so than ever. So I think it's absolutely crucial. And I think for anyone who's relatively new into investing in startups, it's essential. Because, if I also look back, I mean, for a lot of the companies I've invested in, I can add value because I have the network and I have the sort of skills, and some of the skills apply no matter what kind of business you're investing in. but some of them don't. And, and I think in this very new world, in terms of completely kind of changing the way we are addressing problems and also how we're creating new opportunities to do things we hadn't even imagined, there are some very different skill sets required. And yeah, you're right. That ecosystem that sits around incubators is so important. And the fact that people are in, startups are engaged with incubators, the right kind of incubators very early that can offer that.
Would you say incubators are somewhere you look in for investing, potential targets?
So I hadn't before, but I hadn't seen the need in the same way. So
what was your traditional approach?
Oh, through network and people I know, and we meet people and people who've left companies who we follow and actually they've grown up in this amazing environment. They're going to go and do a startup. We know them. Someone knows. Yeah, let's chat with them. Yeah, we're happy to support them because they've grown up in an environment that was successful. There's a better chance. I think it was a 23%. I think those are the numbers I was given. Better chance of them succeeding than someone who hasn't grown up in a successful startup. But back to when I met Craig, and I was just sort of really interested in terms of what AI Forge was doing, I was like, okay, I just want to hear what is going to happen during these 12 weeks. And what was really, really important for me, and I think it was a sort of light bulb moment, was so because of how quickly, with the right kind of infrastructure and reusability and skills deployed, we can build an MVP using these technologies. We can then use so much more of that time actually kind of shaping the business and coaching around the business and coaching about maybe engaging customers in the process. So whereas traditionally an incubator is spending so much more time building the code base rather than doing the things you actually need to do to build a business, which again, having an MVP really helps. But the AI Forge setup with the infrastructure and the skills that are in place and all that sort of all the reusable components that are there, allows us to really rapidly build something of real value and instead focus on, okay, how can we, really coach and help the founder do the things he needs to do to grow or she needs to do to grow a business.
It's detrimental when you're spending, some people make the mistake of spending months and months and months building the perfect product with, a billion features, and they just throw it out to the market and say, hey, does this work? Do you like it? And even if you don't want to do that, most people, all they can do is spend as much time as they can to try and build their MVP, and they've wasted lots of time. Perhaps the market has even changed in that time, and it would have been a product which is viable before, but now the fit is gone. But what we kind of push with our founders in the incubator is a lean stack framework, so we can develop your products, your minimal viable product, as soon as you can with our teams of developers, and that means you can instantly, test your product, bring it to the market, and then bring it back to the drawing board and adapt accordingly and just repeat the process at a much accelerated rate. Would you say, experience with startups and investing, how do you look at pivots and when they happen, when they've brought their initial idea to the market and then they've decided maybe this isn't working, how do you react to that?
Well, I think, the decision becomes quite obvious. If you're going to pivot, it's because as long as you're pivoting for the right reasons, i.e., that's what the market's telling you need to do, then it's just part of the growth of the company.
Do you invest to see that as progress, or would you see it as warning signs? How do you discern, oh God, it's crashing, to okay, they're making progress and they're developing and my investment is safe?
So the warning signs are quite simply, are they acquiring new customers or not? And if they're not acquiring new customers, why not? And what are they doing about it? So, and of course you have, we have issues. It's what do you do to remediate when, and of course, being a founder, key is be driven by what customers want. And in the end, if you're building something customers want, well, you should have a successful business. And that's the challenge. And so pivoting, whether that's 10 degrees or 360 degrees, it's irrelevant. It's just, if you're following what the customer, that's what you've got to do. So, and yeah, you quite often can start up. And I think what I was saying with picking the right founder, that pivot could happen within that company, but that pivot could also happen because they've left and then gone and done something else. And that's the sort of, but the person has made the right decision. It doesn't necessarily always happen within the company. So, yeah, that's just part of growing, growing and adapting. And so it was interesting what you were saying about this sort of lean stack and everything else. And I think when we would go out and qualify with our potential customers about what they wanted, it would be a sort of with a PowerPoint, in terms of this is what we're going to think about doing. And of course, I think the brilliant thing with this sort of AI setup these days in terms of all the tools and everything available is that, well, I can actually deliver something that works.
PowerPoint was your MVP, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, that's what it was, and now the MVP can be something that works, which is, and especially when it's done in an accelerator like this, it's super exciting.
That's something I've noticed, that, when you've got, instead of just coming to investors and the market, the customers themselves with PowerPoint slides, here's what we're going to do. We have the expertise to, give you all the very personalized, correct technology to use to forget the PowerPoints. Let's make a product from that as soon as physically possible. And let's just get the products quickly and actually get a product instead of just, writing down an idea on a paper and saying, hey, how do you feel about this? It's all about just getting the knowledge of what tech is out there, which can help me do this.
Which, ultimately, if you want to see, you want someone to test drive, see what driving your car that you're proposing them is like, it can't help if they can get in it and drive it.
Yeah.
So, the closer you can get to giving them something that they can operate with in the way they would do in the real world, the more likely you are to get sort of feedback and buy-in, engagement. So, then as I say, that's what's great about what's possible these days. It's super exciting. And again, but if you're a startup and you want to do that, and you want to do that without an accelerator, without an incubator, you're going to need quite a lot of money. You're going to take quite a lot of risk on the headcount risk in terms of building the infrastructure to make that possible. So all of a sudden, that becomes almost like a traditional startup. Whereas, with an incubator like AI Forge, and you can actually sort of, they take not an unreasonable slug of equity in your startup. They're delivering huge value super quickly, which ultimately allows you to qualify really, is this, are we on the right track or aren't we?
A bit off topic, but I heard a rumor, I heard through the grapevine, about something, your interesting approach to life after you had your successful exit. I heard you went to live in a hut in the woods.
Well, actually, when I had a friend, who sold me a yurt, a Turkmeni wedding yurt. So I put it up in the hills in Spain.
And this was after you had
So I sold out my shares just before we IPO'd.
Which company was
with Intech Telecom. Mm-hmm. And I sort of, around that time I got divorced and went to live in a yurt in the hills with no running water or electricity to sort of contemplate life for about a year, which was a really good thing to do. I kind of really needed to get away from growing your own startup. Is really tiring, and it's also, there can be quite a lot of politics and stuff involved in the process as well, and especially when you're approaching listing. And I just needed to get away from it all. I'd had enough. And I was actually saved by a friend of mine that I'd invested in, who'd set up an SAP HR consultancy company. And he gave me a call one day and said, look, I think we need help. We're just a UK company. We need to set up internationally. Tom, come on. You've done that for your own startup. Please just come and help us. I was like,
come out of the woods.
No, I don't think so. I don't know if I want to do that. And anyway, I said, well, look, anyway, I'm going off to South Africa. I've got a friend's birthday. It's their 40th. And he said, well, actually, it so happens, which plane are you getting on? And so I told him I was going to Johannesburg. He said, well, I tell you, there's a chap you've got to meet. And he said, I want you to take a rusty nail to the gentleman in seat 3A on the flight. I was like, okay. So that gentleman was Les Heyman. And Les Heyman was ex-main board member of SAP. He'd set up some microsystems Asia Pacific. And Jerry, who was my friend at the time, well, he sadly passed away a few years ago. He'd persuaded Les to come in as chairman of our little company. And actually his story about how we got Les to come in as chairman was quite funny. So Les was a big fish on the speaker circuit. Everyone wanted Les Heyman to talk, really well known in the SAP world. And the big SAP event annually is the Sapphire Conference. And Les was doing a keynote there. And afterwards, he kind of stepped down, and then, everyone sort of gathers around him, chit-chat, and he's very good with all the jokes. And he was telling a story about his racehorse that had been selected as part of the New Zealand team to go to the Olympics. Anyway, as everyone sort of started to peter out, my friend Jerry, turns up and he goes, Les, can I persuade you? Can I interest you in a donkey? And Les burst out laughing. And I said, "It's donkey." He said, "Well, yeah, it's the company that I run. It's a bit of a donkey, really, and it needs someone like you."
Okay.
So,
It wasn't a real donkey.
No, it wasn't a real donkey.
Okay.
So Les agreed to get involved, and they had an offsite about, okay, how are we going to grow this business? And Les and Jerry had agreed that Jerry should call me and get me to meet him. So I met Les on the plane and to South Africa, and we sort of chit-chatted away.
You gave him the nail.
He gave him the rusty nail.
What was a nail?
Rusty nail's a drink.
Ah.
So he was very partial to. And he said, look, so Les had a chateau in the south of France. He was like, look, Tom, you're going out to this birthday party. I'm heading home after my business trip here. I want to invite you and Jerry out of the chateau in France. We need to talk about what you're going to do. So he invited me for a few days to his, chateau in the south of France with Jerry. And we drank a lot of Bordeaux because he had a vineyard. He's had a vineyard there. And he persuaded me to leave my year and get back to work, which was great. And in fact, that restarted my sort of active investing because I'd done a bit before privately, and then I started investing quite a bit with Les in various startups. And so we'd had quite a interesting ride together with that.
So you got involved with Les as an investor, or how did you get involved?
No, so I was already an investor in this company. So I owned about quarter the shares in the company, and but it was quite hands off. I knew the guys, they were my friends. I'd invested in them because I really believed in them, and say they were growing, but they'd sort of topped out in the UK, and it was all about how do we grow internationally. And I'd done quite a bit of that work before, and so I knew quite a lot of people, and so. It was great, and I'm so glad he did that because I don't know what would have happened otherwise. And although I really enjoyed my year, so I can often think about that. But
what did you do there in the woods in the?
It just got into lots of trouble. There were lots of goats. The goats would come every morning at about 7, and you can hear the bells, and then we'd be raided by all these pigs that the neighbour refused to fence in. And they'd steal everything, the pigs would. And and I really enjoyed. I had a horse, and I did a lot of windsurfing and kite surfing, and early days. Everyone talks. So that's when it first started. Yeah, it was fun. It was really, really nice. And I, as a sort of a complete contrast to the kind of crazy manic world of startup, I was literally just watching the day go by. And everything slowed down completely.
Did that help you avoid burning out?
Well, I think I had burnt out, so that's why I had.
That was you burnt out.
Yeah, no, I was completely burnt out.
But then you came back. As an investor.
Yeah, but one of the things I often tell people I invest with these days is your most important investor, if they're married, is your partner, and you need to remember that because one of the reasons I ended up getting divorced was because actually my startup was my affair, if you will, and because startups consume everything, and I think you owe it to the people you invest with to support them in every way and to remind them of a lot of these things. Because one thing's about getting a return, but part of investing is getting a return, but part of it is actually just being part of the creation, the building process with other people who you like. And you don't want their life to fall apart as a consequence of that project. So, it's really important to kind of, to sometimes be the kind of voice on the shoulder that says, look, actually, you know what? It is really important. It is everything, but you do need to understand that if your relationship's really important to you, you're going to have to make time and you're going to have to look after your relationship in this way because it's so easy to forget your partner when you're building a business. So yeah, I think but that's the sort of fun really, because the startup community, when you're, these companies become, some of them it's quite hands off, but some of the people who run these companies become good friends of yours, and you want the best for them. And sometimes that's about earning a lot of money, having a great exit, but sometimes that's just about actually feeling a sense of achievement that might not ultimately result in a massive exit, but but a life that's intact and good health, because health is also another thing that's on the table if you don't manage it well enough,
And would you say it was easier for you to manage as an investor rather than deep in it as a startup?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I thought investing, and I have been working with someone very closely for the last sort of 10, 15 years, investing, who's been doing quite a lot of the harder work around it with me. The last couple of years I've been much more active again, and you get emotionally caught up in it. So, as I said, it's quite often you have to almost go to the wall to bounce back and do really well. And if you're with them, and you're with them going to the wall almost, and sometimes going to the wall, it's quite emotional. And okay, it's not you working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but you're there because you care, and it's not just, it's about the money to some extent, but it's not just about the money. It's more about, it's about the relationship, and it is probably winning. We want to win, because startups are kind of real David and Goliath thing. You're entering a space and there's established players and everything else, but there you are, and it's like you haven't got a chance, almost, you know what I mean, almost. And then it's like, well, but we do. We just got to do it smart, and there's just immense satisfaction around that. But of course, you got to be incredibly creative, and you've got to really go there sometimes to add value in your head, put yourself in their position to help. And so it can be quite emotionally draining.
When do you decide to step in and, really apply yourself to a startup versus, just, here's my investment, I'm going to go to Spain. Let me know how it goes.
So I think because some people you end up with a closer relationship with, you inevitably get drawn in.
Yeah.
And then others where you can really add value. So you want to add that value because it's also nice to be reminded, at 56, you can bring value. We all need it. Do you know what? If you're not adding value, you don't feel you're adding value to the things you're doing, you quite quickly lose confidence.
Yeah.
And so, back to why we invest, personally, I do it because I need to stay relevant. I need to feel I'm contributing, and as well, that's also important. So, yeah.
Do you ever get your kids' opinion on your investments?
Yeah, I like to engage them, and I put my kids into startups. I put my friends' kids into startups. I mean, one of the great pleasures I get is, because you're in these really interesting companies and doing really great people doing really interesting things. And well, what better thing to do also than expose young people to those people? And they're so giving, people who start stuff, they're in the process of building, and they want to, and they understand the value of the ecosystem. And the ecosystem quite often is young people getting engaged too, because, that builds goodwill and everything else. And sometimes young kids come in at 15, 16 and they've got some good ideas. It's interesting, the faster we change, the faster, if we look at what's happening, the advent of AI and everything that's going on, in a sense, all the rules have been rewritten so quickly. And actually sometimes the more naive the view, the more creative it is, and sometimes the older you are, the more, and old these days is not necessarily that old, the more stuck in an old way of thinking you are. So, but it's a really nice thing to do anyway, just to sort of, as part of, we talk about community around startups, but it's just community of founders doing all helping each other. And helping each other means also helping each other's families and children, and just doing whatever you can just to kind of make this journey that, although we might all be different, doing different things and looking at it from different perspectives, investor, founder, whatever it may be, partner of investor, partner of founder.
Yeah.
How can we all help each other out?
I think that's something we see a lot at AI Forge, because we've just got a massive team of founders all doing their own completely separate thing. We've got a doctor trying to revolutionize referrals. We've got someone trying to revolutionize the mortgage system, credit ratings. Everyone's doing completely different things, but then we're all in the exact same place, constantly talking to each other and, you know, building personal relationships, building a team with people basically in the same spot you are. You know, some people, they've just come from a big corporate. Some people have just, you know, they've just come from something completely different. The community is something that's really important, like you said, and also with young people, you know, we're a lot more free thinking, right? We're creative, maybe don't have the knowledge, but we have that probably is helpful, right? In some ways, because it means we're wild with our ideas. We also give our founders interns, you know, so try and you know, build that community and give them that value of, you know, the young mind. So yeah, I think it's really great that you give your kids that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really nice if all kids had. My sister runs an online school, and they have kids from all over the world. In fact, they have a lot of those children are in Ukraine at the moment, and one part, you know, the children are in Kiev versus the people who are, you know, further away from the war. You know, in the middle of the you know, lessons, they have to move down to the air raid shelter, whereas the other lot in the class don't have to, and all this stuff that's going on. But we were talking yesterday about, look, why can't we? Is there some way we can use even the startups in my network? You know, Sarah's my sister, and I just say, look, we could just get a founder. Let's get these kids on the phone once a week to a founder for an hour. You know, afternoon session. Let's just have a chat with, you know, whoever it may be. You know, the person was the lead architect behind Cruise, which is the robo-taxi platform in California, or could it be the guy who recruited Steve Jobs into Apple, Rick Devine? I mean, these are people I've invested in, you know. Or it could be the people here in the UK that are actually joining the Forge and mutually that are working with metabolic health for families and why they've done that. What was their personal journey? It really doesn't matter. But for an hour, these kids can just chit chat with founders and go, well, why'd you do? And just start to sort of think about the art of the possible. Because I think having 3 teenage kids, I sort of know this, and actually having been someone who's quite disillusioned at school and left at 15 and a half, being able to connect with what you're doing at school with real world problems is really, really, really important. And it's too abstract for too many children. And I think, you know, even looking at it from that perspective, and there's so many things we can do, which is just really, really healthy, which is just encouraging this sort of spirit of innovation.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's so exciting. I mean, I think we've touched on why I kind of invest. And for me, it's so exciting to be involved with all of these people doing all these different things. And it makes everything sort of worthwhile. Because there's only so many times you can go out to eat. There's only so many times you can go on your awesome ride or go out windsurfing, whatever it may be. But you can never do too much of being around different founders, running different startups, trying to solve just some really big problems and some really small problems. It's just super exciting. It's what my son wrote to me last night, and he was chatting. He said, Dad, I've just been put up a maths group, which is pretty good because half the kids there are sort of Russian and Chinese, so they're very good at maths. And he said, you know, but it's so frustrating because, you know, I'm just solving problems. And I said, well, you know, and I'm having to work out these problems in order to solve bigger problems. And I said, well, but Max, it's what we're here to do. We're here to solve problems.
Yeah.
And it's exciting that you've actually, you know, now more than ever, we've got tools to solve real problems. And it's such a fun time.
Yeah, especially when you get the opportunity to work with such a diverse set of different problems. And then, you know, you ask one question with a problem and it leads to 10 more. And you just dig deeper and deeper and you learn so much along the way. It's a much better way to learn, you know, through problem solving, real world problem solving. I'm sure perhaps, you know, when you left school at 15 and decided to join a graduate program, you probably realized that, you know, in the real world, you learn at a much accelerated pace, right?
Well, I think I realized that fortunately there was space for the skills that I had that school didn't seem to appreciate, which I'd still struggle to call them skills, but my youngest is a bit like me. So I tell him, look, I know you're doing really badly at school, but those skills that you've got, they're going to be really valuable. What skills, Dad? They don't measure me at school on these skills. I said, no, don't worry. Someone's got to go and tell the story. So, you know, I think, yeah, so when you get out into the real world, you really realize what value, everyone's got value to bring, and I think it's sometimes in school, it's especially in the UK schooling system, it's all quite abstract and it's very hard. And it's very hard if you don't fit in that sort of band of people who just do really well academically, which is a real shame because it doesn't mean you haven't got anything to contribute, but that's how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of my friends, throughout when I was going through school, that I can tell they're brilliant people in so many ways, but their grades just aren't. They don't really. School isn't for them, and it's just one little rigid system we've kind of made as a society. It doesn't define anything about how anything is meant to go, how humans best elevate themselves. Yeah, I totally agree.
And on the schooling thing, so it's quite funny. I mean, 'cause I personally believe, I think we should start earlier in looking for entrepreneurs, much earlier than we do. One of the youngest guy I invested in was 16.
16?
Yeah, he picked up the phone to me and he said, look, I won Robot Wars when I was 12, so I know all about supply chains. And what I've done for myself, I think I can help small startup companies who want to bring products to market. And I think I can help large companies that are trying to build product that are just too inefficient and do it. What do you reckon? I said, well, jump on a plane. So he did. And he flew out to see me, and near Gibraltar, and we ended up in this really horrid little cafe. I still feel guilty about it to this day. And we had a chat. But you know what? He was so great. And he was UK BMX champion as well. So he obviously, he had some stuff about him. And his dad was the architect of the largest offshore liquid gas platform. So he was very, very smart. He said, look, I could go to University of Engineering, but I reckon I know more than they know. So I managed to talk a bunch of my friends into investing in him because it was him. And he's gone on and built products for, so many companies. I think the largest contract he's won today was 20 million with Carlsberg. So he's, and I wonder how many people are there like him that get missed. And I think there's a lot of them. Well, not necessarily a lot, but they're there. And often probably these are the ones sometimes that don't end up with the opportunity, just because some things just don't go right for them. Because it's tough, you leave school without an education, and then what? Society is really, you've really got to kind of have a bit of luck and a bit of nous to sort of somehow escape that place that you've ended up in on the hierarchy. I mean, I was really lucky that I ended up out in Sweden, as I said, because they all thought I was, done really well because I'd been sent there. That wasn't true. It's actually because they didn't want to use me in the UK. But that's another thing.
It's about the consensus, like you said, getting people to really vouch for you as well. And this 16-year-old, I'm sure he was brilliant, but it definitely took an inch of luck to be able to actually meet you, right? To get connected with you or something.
But he made his own luck. I even asked him how many phone calls he made. He made a lot of calls to a lot of people. Yeah. But he just wasn't going to give up.
So is this how it went? You get a call, it's a +4 for wherever you were, and it just says, hey, I'm 16, but I won this competition and I think I can change the world. And you said, yeah, come, let's fly through. And let's talk about.
Yeah, so I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was pretty short and sweet. And he was quite, I liked his voice on the phone, and he was just quite crisp about what he wanted. And he said, I'll get on a plane, come see you. So, okay. How was I going to say no to that?
Would you say that's your riskiest investment so far? Or is there something else?
Oh no, there's lots of risk. I didn't know where the upside was in that with him, but I really believed in him. And all of us who invested in him said, look, he is going to be extraordinarily successful.
Yeah.
We just don't know if it will be with this investment. Mm-hmm. But we all wanted to do it because we really believed in him. And it comes back to the person again.
Yeah. And okay, so what would you say in your experience has been one of your riskiest investments? And then why did you still go for it? And how did it turn out?
Well, I've had plenty that have gone to the wall. And I think the biggest mistake I've made in investing is more probably that, is when I've been a bit too hands off.
Hands off.
Yeah, and not really got to know the founder well enough, and I've followed other people in, but haven't validated for myself.
Okay, so that raises an interesting question, because I think everyone differs on this when it comes to investment. How would you define the difference between investment and speculation?
Well, it's all speculation, isn't it? So, I mean, you invest knowing that you could get nothing.
But I mean, it's about, what is genuinely just a complete gamble, and then at what point do I say this is an intelligent investment? Sorry, that's probably a better way to phrase it. At what point do you say this is an intelligent, it's...
Yeah, but there's no crystal ball, so crypto's been a sort of classic for that. I mean, I've had my biggest ever loss in crypto,
Many have.
So I'm from a 25k investment, I got a 7-figure return that I didn't cash in. And it's not gone quite back to zero, but you kind of go, what was really interesting about that, psychologically for me, was I didn't really feel that it was mine. Whereas, because it was so far and away from anything I understood, I just didn't even get it. Whereas other investments where I've been really, I've really understood and been really there, I've sort of cashed out when I've had the opportunity to a certain extent on the way, because I know that's the prudent thing to do. But I didn't in this one, and I still don't understand why. I think it was just this weird, it's going to get bigger sort of thing, which was just crazy. I would never have thought that in anything else. I mean, my father lost all his money at Lloyd's of London, which is reinsurance. And he was a very successful entrepreneur. And, I grew up with that. He lost everything when I was 12. And I always told myself, whatever happens, at any opportunity, I'll never have any debt. So I've never had any debt. And I will always cash out on the way when I'm, so if I get the opportunity of secondaries or whatever, I will take it.
At what point?
Well, whenever I get the opportunity, I'll get my investment back a bit more. For example, when we had Zendesk, I kicked myself. I mean, I was first, second investor into Zendesk.
Really?
And yeah. And
you were first through the door with Zendesk?
Huh?
One of the first through the door with Zendesk?
Yeah, absolutely. I recruited the number 3 in Zendesk out of what could have been nothing more than a stationery shop back in the day to come and work for me. And we got on really
well. Found him...
Well, he was, I was, when I went to Denmark to set up my business in Denmark.
Right.
I just, I kind of wanted to sort of recruit people like me, and I met him. Yeah, I think he was in it. It was when people say Apple shop today, you have a picture of a kind of amazing showroom and everything else. Back in the day, the Apple computer was used by graphic designers. So the shops that used to sell Apple computers were kind of backstreet shops and things like that. It wasn't like it is now, like a high street shop. I mean, no one was using Apple computers in normal business, and no way. So he was working there, and I recruited him out of there to come and work for me. We became really good friends. He was really bad at what he had to go and do when he was working for me. He didn't do a great job, but we stayed friends. And he was the number 3 person into Zendesk, and he gave me a call, and he said, "Tom, I'm doing this. I think there's going to be there's something here in it."
What was he doing there?
So he was helping them on the sales side.
Okay.
So he was like, "Hey, Tom, I think they might be onto something." And honestly, when I met the guys, it was like, they were really nice guys, everything else. I was like, yeah. Okay, looks really interesting. So I invested in, I think probably second ticket in, and I did incredibly well at Zendesk. And, but I exited, as soon as they IPO'd, I exited, and they went up 10 times after that.
Ouch.
So,
but you still must have made a massive return.
Yeah, I did. I made a huge return, and but that was just my kind of mentality. Was just like, no, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Don't trust the public markets. I'm out. And I've done that consistently over the years, because I mean, I've had some very, very, very good returns, but I've always been quite conservative on my exit, except my one crypto investment, which was.
I think with crypto, it kind of detaches you from the money almost. Seeing it in the cryptocurrency rather than in the fiat currency, and then it's just jumping up and down every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You lose that emotional attachment completely, and it kind of gets rid of that urge to pull out. Even if
but it's insanity. It was like an arcade game. It's just that's how utterly crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not. They're not dead yet. They've actually got some interesting stuff coming, but still,
What was the ballpark of your ROI for Zendesk? Can I ask?
Yeah, well, it was well over 100 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is it started from someone you met in a small little kind of tech shop.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so but it was in a lot of the companies I invested in the early days were through people I'd worked with.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew them, and they went on to do things, and it's like, okay, I'm going to follow them.
What was it about that particular sales guy who ended up working at Zendesk which intrigued you into putting your money in?
I'd really like to tell you that I had done something, I'd really thought about this and analysed the market. It was utter rubbish. I didn't, and it was just because why not? And I liked him, I liked them. When they were telling me about what they were doing, I probably shouldn't really admit, I didn't really necessarily understand why they were going to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
But they believed it.
Yeah.
And I think there was something about that. And I know that from when I've been selling, I know what it's like. If you can conjure up that enthusiasm and everything else. And sometimes it doesn't matter what you say, it's what your body's saying. And so they had that sort of impact on me. And so that's why I invest in Zendesk. Yeah.
So looking back, you'd say that you're trusting your gut in investment is something you can kind of appeal to sometimes.
Yeah, I think sometimes you do need to, that's why we were talking about it earlier about overthinking it. You can overthink it.
Mm-hmm.
You try, and you end up trying to convince yourself to ignore your gut. And your gut generally is pretty good at telling you what not to do. And you end up trying to rationalize yourself away from the gut feeling. And that's why I say about falling in love with the idea, which is the wrong thing to do.
Okay, and would you say to what extent is it hit or miss? Is there any sort of formulaic approach you can take?
So,
or is it all kind of, well, it's completely indifferent to, how much research I've done in this area, what my gut is saying in this area?
So when I became friends with Les Heyman,
yeah,
and he was buddies with Tom Siebel and all that lot, I remember, I hadn't been really formally investing, in a kind of structured way. And Les and I were chatting about it. Les invested quite a bit, and we were talking about it. And he said, look, Tom, I've talking with all my buddies, it's kind of simple. We don't make it complicated. It's 1 in 10 is going to do really well. 3 are going to do okay. The rest are going to go to the wall. Invest the same amount every time, and make sure everyone you invest in you think could be 100 bagger. If you don't think it's going to be 100 times, if it goes well, don't do it.
So it's unicorn or nothing.
Yeah, you've got to believe that if they get this right, they're going to hit it out of the park.
And this is a kind of approach you still use today.
Yeah. It's and a couple of times I've stepped out of that thesis. One of them where I invested a very large amount, fortunately I didn't lose it. But I think because in a sense, when you're investing early, it's an educated guess at best, okay? And of course the things that are closer to what you can influence to some extent. But
you didn't know much about crypto.
No, exactly. So you've got to have a probability. You've got to take the view that, okay, 1 time in 10, I'm going to get this. If I'm doing these other bits right, which is, kind of cross, just triangulating with some other people I know and I respect, and both in terms of the business area, the kind of problem they're trying to solve, but also the person. okay, we'll sort of between us, we'll get it right 1 in 10.
So you don't intentionally go for the spray and pray approach. You try and take a sniper approach, only invest in ones which you think are going to give you that massive return, but it usually ends up being, only one of the few which do give you that return.
Yeah,
So it's not a numbers game.
Well, what it is at the end of the day, you have to go into it with that in mind and say, look, I'd say it's probably a bit better than I've just said, how it works out, but I can't tell you because I'm not through. I've got about 250 investments, and I'm probably out the other side on 15, and probably of those, how many have gone to the wall? Maybe 7. How many have done really well? 4. So
And that balances it out.
yeah, more than balances out.
Yeah.
Bear in mind what I was saying about the 10 to 1, 100 to 1. So
Yeah.
But what's going to happen to the rest? I don't have any idea. I've got some sense, but we've seen a big change in the capital markets. How tech companies are valued, the opportunity for liquidity, so valuations are suppressed. So yeah, I'd have had 2 or 3 more unicorns if we hadn't had the suppression in valuations that we've had over the last 18 months, definitely now. So, but okay, that's the way it works, so.
Okay. Well, before we end, I'd like to ask you one more question. With what advice would you give to investors? Maybe something that is a common misconception, which in your experience isn't true, or perhaps just a general message you'd like to tell most investors you think that they wouldn't have heard before?
Well, surprisingly, the one... I think it's more that sort of framework with which you look at investments, and you've got to look at who you're investing with as someone you would trust with your money, and you believe that they're going to work to give you a really good return on your money. So you've really got to trust the person you're putting money with, and believe that you think they're going to do something exceptional. I don't think you need to make it any more complicated than that. And of course, from an interest perspective, you get into what they're doing and everything else. But I think when you step back from it all and you close your eyes and you go, do I think this person's going to look after my money and get a really good return? They are 2 different things, by the way. So because very rarely you get people who are quite dishonest with, in terms of how they use your money. So I think it's that. I think just come back, pare it all back. It's about the person. It's about your belief. Think back to the people that you knew younger who've done exceptionally well. And when they were younger, they've now done exceptionally well. And think about the person you're looking to invest in that respect, and think, do I think they, through everything I've ever seen, that I think this person could do really, really well?
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, is there any advice that perhaps you'd like to give to our massive cohort of startup founders? All trying to change the world with AI in their own very unique ways.
Go and test the problem with as many people as possible that you're trying to solve. Go and test that solution for the problem you're trying to solve with as many people as you can. Do not hide away from that. It's too easy to quickly think you've got the solution and start building. No, you need to go and test. We've all done it the other way around, and don't fall into that trap.
That's something that happens a lot, right? People get, an emotional attachment to their idea in its exact form, and they kind of lose the ability to be flexible and pivot, which is something that needs to be done as part of the process, right? Perhaps that's why an environment where it's surrounded by other founders and people who, mentors and people who have been there and done that, who can really tell you objectively, constantly what's wrong with your idea and what's right about it. That's much better than kind of being secluded and just in an echo chamber of, this idea I've had is great.
So yes, I think other founders help you, mentors, all that kind of stuff, but you can't be talking with the people you want to sell to as early as possible.
Yeah.
And
day one.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's where you've got to be out doing that. That's it. And you get that right, they'll invest anyway in the process.
Great. Hey, thank you very much, Tom. It's been a lovely
Good to chat.
conversation.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.